It is June 1943. The Germans had started their massive offensive operation called Operation Citadel. It was supposed to be their breakout moment, an attempt to curb stomp us into oblivion. They had amassed close to 1 million men along with 27,000 tanks and armored vehicles. This was a juggernaut of mind-blowing proportions. However, we would be waiting for them. We would greet them with fire and death. It is here where I would find myself facing my first taste of combat. I crouched behind a damaged stone wall, cradling my bolt-action rifle in my hand. As my heart pounded with adrenaline, beads of sweat dripped off of my face from the sun's scorching heat as I slowly took a sip from my canteen. The Germans had unleashed a devastating bombardment on a number of towns and villages in the area in an attempt to soften us up. However, as the German forces rapidly pushed into those towns, that is where we would be waiting for them. Our commanding officer slowly peered over the wall with the binoculars, examining the rapidly approaching Germans. The German forces that approached us were equipped with half-tracks and trucks, along with 2 Panzer tanks. We were under strict orders to hold this position at all cost. So as the Germans approached, I, along with my comrades, prepared to fight. Many of us hadn't seen action, let alone seen a rifle. However, I had hunted small birds and rodents back on my farm with the slingshot, and I had become a pretty good shot with it. However, the thought of shooting another human being made me sick to my stomach. There was no turning back now. As the sound of engines and tracks grew louder and louder, each man trained his weapon in the direction of the Germans. We all held still, not making a noise. We allowed them to push further into our kill zone. Once they had gotten close enough, our commanding officer gave us the order. We opened up on them with a devastating barrage of rifle fire, machine gun fire, and rifle-launched grenades. The first half-track in the lead, after being hit with the hail of bullets, would immediately veer off to the side and crash into a wooden fence. Our overwhelming firepower had instantly deleted the driver along with most of the soldiers riding in the back. I saw men trying to leap from out of the half-track, but as they stood up, they were instantly dropped, their bodies slumping over as we fired into the densely packed vehicle. Only a few men managed to climb out of the now burning half-track and drop to the ground. The second half-track behind it immediately stopped also, and the German soldiers inside of it started trying to jump out, but we also gave them a good serving of bullets. Many of the Germans were so caught off guard that they didn't even have a chance to react before they were shot. However, the Germans that managed to escape their vehicles were able to spread out and take cover. We continued pouring heavy rifle fire and machine gun fire into the German columns until we halted their entire advance. By now, the ground was littered with dozens of Germans, both alive and unalive. However, by now, many of the German soldiers were now aware of the ambush they had walked into. They would begin to fan out and return fire. My comrades and I would find ourselves in an intense firefight as bullets zoomed by in every direction. Men from both sides would be dropped like rag dolls as we fought desperately to hold the Germans at bay. Knowing I only had 5 rounds per magazine in my bolt-action rifle, I would choose my next actions carefully. I would aim my rifle and fire at a German, then immediately drop back down, covering my head with my hand. There were times where I knew I missed, and times where I knew I had found my target. I felt a fear grip me that is hard for me to describe. Now there were 2 Panzer tanks accompanying the Germans, and despite their overwhelming superior firepower and armor, we were prepared for them. A number of my comrades, who were armed with Molotov cocktails and grenades, had hid themselves in houses and trenches, concealing themselves. The German infantry, now fully engaging us in a brutal firefight, would try to advance on us by taking cover behind one of the tanks as it slowly advanced towards our position. There must have been about 17 Germans behind that tank as it advanced. Many of my comrades would try to engage the Germans behind the tank, but as they exposed themselves to the Germans, they would get smoked. The tank, now being about 100 yards from me, turned its main gun and fired in my direction, instantly evicting the lives of a number of my comrades. The blast was so powerful that I was instantly knocked to the ground. The men around me scrambled around in an attempt to get out of the way. However, the tank had taken the bait. Earlier, we had set landmines in front of our positions, and with the German tank now being directly over the landmines, our commanding officer gave the order, and we blew it. 'It 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 ' The explosion sent shrapnel and pieces of debris all over the place, halting the Panzer in its tracks, rendering it immobile. The blast from the landmines was so powerful that the crew must have all been eliminated because the hatch had blown completely off and fire and smoke poured out of it. As for the German infantry behind the tank, they were completely blown apart from the blast. The sight of what was left of them was unlike anything I had ever seen. Now, with the first tank being knocked out of action, our attention soon turned to the second tank. However, as it slowly advanced towards us, our rifles and machine gun fire would prove useless against its thick armor, bouncing off the tank like drops of water. Many of my comrades' lives would be evicted by the tank as it rapidly advanced, crushing anything and anyone under its tracks. Its main gun fired indiscriminately into our positions. However, a number of our comrades were waiting for the tank to pass by. Our men, risking their own lives by exposing themselves to fire, quickly rushed for it and tossed their Molotov cocktails and grenades on the tank, exploding and catching it on fire. The tank, now being engulfed in flames, rapidly halted and began to quickly back up. In doing so, it ran over a number of German soldiers who were behind it, crushing them like grapes in the hand of a winemaker. As the tank rapidly backed up, it would crash into a pile of rubble. Many of our comrades would train our weapons on the tank and began to fire into the burning mass in an attempt to evict the lives of anyone who tried to escape. The tank commander and gunner tried to exit the burning tank through the hatches, but my comrades hosed the tank down with suppressive fire, evicting their lives. Simultaneously, the German infantry who were still engaging us would begin to fall back after seeing this, leaving 2 knocked out tanks and a number of half-tracks and trucks behind. Many of us seeing this left our positions and pursued them, firing at them like they were prey. Still being shook up from the blast from the tank, I stood up to my feet and stumbled over towards the burning tank. 2 other comrades walked over next to me and stood beside me as we looked at the burning Panzer, puzzled by its unique and different design. We were about to turn away from the tank, but we heard voices crying out, coming from the tank. They were screaming in broken Russian for us to save them. My 2 comrades just stood there, listening to the 2 men pleading and begging to be helped from the burning tank. I felt my heart break as their screams grew louder and louder, as if though the heat from the flames was finally reaching them. One of my comrades pulled out a grenade and smiled as he walked over to the burning tank in an effort to throw the grenade inside one of the open hatches. I don't know what overtook me, but I immediately grabbed him and pushed him back and immediately cried out to them in broken German to come out and that we wouldn't hurt them. But my comrades grabbed me and pulled me back away from the tank as another with the grenade threw the grenade inside of the open hatch. The men inside of the tank went silent after the grenade exploded, its flames now completely covering the tank. We withdrew back from it and took shelter in some trenches. The tank, being engulfed in flames, finally exploded, sending heaps of steel flying through the air. My commanding officer, along with my comrades, beat me until I was bloody. They found my actions insane. How could I want to save the lives of these men, they asked. They soon left me on the ground. As I lay there, I grabbed my rifle and used it to stand to my feet. I held the rifle in my hands and examined it. What was I fighting for? To take the life of a defenseless person, no matter who they were, was something I couldn't stomach. I immediately began to throw up. I don't know if it was from the smoke and smell of burning human flesh coming from the tanks or from the broken ribs I received from my so-called comrades. But little did I know that my problems were about to get a whole lot worse, because the Battle of Kursk was only getting started.